Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at the economy, and we're going hyper-local for this one, focusing on the Federal Reserve's February 2025 Beige book for the 5th District,
Yeah.
and that is Maryland, North and South Carolina,
Cool.
Virginia, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Now you might be thinking, what is a Beige book?
Yeah.
Well, it's essentially a collection of anecdotes and observations from businesses
Yeah.
that gives the Fed kind of a real-world pulse check on the economy.
Right.
And believe me, there's some pretty interesting stuff in this report that I think you'll want to know about.
Okay.
For example, did you know that furniture sales are slumping?
Oh,
What does that tell us about the bigger picture?
that's a great question. And it really highlights what makes the Beige book so fascinating, right? It's not just numbers, it's stories.
Right.
The overall tone for the 5th District this time around is modest economic growth,
Okay.
but with a lot of uncertainty kind of swirling around.
Yeah, it's like that feeling you get when you're waiting for election results to come in.
Right. A little nerve-wracking.
Exactly.
And speaking of uncertainty, let's talk about jobs.
Okay.
The report says that net employment was unchanged.
Yeah.
But what's hidden in that unchanged is actually a lot of movement. Some sectors are adding jobs,
Right.
while others, particularly those tied to government funding, are seeing layoffs.
Yeah, that's an important point. It's not just about the total number of jobs, right?
Right.
But what kinds of jobs are being lost or gained.
Right.
And this time around, it seems like federal workers and government contractors were hit particularly hard,
Yeah,
which is a sign of the times, wouldn't you say?
definitely. And it's not just government jobs. The tech sector is also showing signs of cooling down.
Really?
One IT recruiting agency that was interviewed for the report reported a significant drop in demand.
Yeah.
Not exactly the booming tech scene we're used to hearing about.
No, not at all. It makes you wonder, though, right?
Yeah.
Is this a sign of companies just tightening their belts?
Right.
Or a shift in the types of tech skills that are needed?
And this is a big one. Are we seeing the early effects of automation replacing jobs faster than we thought?
That's a little unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah.
If even tech jobs aren't safe, what does that mean for the rest of us?
It's a wake-up call, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, it emphasizes the need to be adaptable and constantly learning new skills no matter what field you're in.
Right.
We'll have to unpack this more, I think, as the trend develops.
Absolutely. And speaking of things that affect everyone, the report also highlighted growing concern about tariffs.
Oh, yeah.
Many businesses, especially those in construction and manufacturing,
Mhm.
are worried about the rising costs of materials
Right.
because of tariffs.
Hmm.
The report specifically mentions lumber and building supplies,
Okay.
which has a huge impact on the real estate market.
Yeah, imagine you're a contractor trying to build a new home, right? And suddenly the lumber you need costs 20% more because of tariffs.
Ouch.
That extra cost has to be absorbed somewhere, either by the contractor or the home buyer, or both. Right. That's a real-world example of how these tariffs can trickle down and affect everyone.
Exactly.
And of course, that feeds into those inflation fears we keep hearing about.
Right, it's all a chain reaction. Higher costs for businesses lead to higher prices for consumers,
Right.
which can erode purchasing power and make people think twice about spending.
Speaking of spending, the report also noted a slowdown in retail and leisure, partly due to winter weather,
Okay.
but also because it seems like people are being more cautious with their money.
Mason.
Even fast casual restaurants,
Oh, well.
which are usually seen as a more affordable dining option, are feeling the pinch.
You know, I find that detail particularly interesting because it suggests that this economic anxiety is impacting people across different income levels.
Yeah,
And it's not just those at the very top or bottom feeling the squeeze,
right.
but that middle ground too.
So is this just a winter blip
Right.
or a sign of a larger trend? And if it is a trend, what does that mean for the future of the economy, especially here in the 5th District?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
To answer that, we need to look at other indicators,
Okay.
like what's happening in the housing market. The report paints kind of a mixed picture there.
It's a real head-scratcher. Inventory is tight, interest rates are still high, and now you've got this added layer of job insecurity, making people hesitant to buy.
Yeah.
Virginia in particular seems to be feeling the pressure.
Right.
And then, of course, you have the lingering impact of Hurricane Helene in North Carolina.
Oh, right.
The report mentions some areas are still struggling to get homes back on the market because of insurance issues and ongoing repairs.
There's like a perfect storm of factors impacting the housing market.
Yeah.
And it makes it really difficult to predict what's going to happen next.
Right.
Will prices continue continue to rise?
Yeah.
Will more homes come on the market?
Right.
Will buyers regain confidence?
Right.
These are all open questions. But before we get too bogged down in the doom and gloom.
Right. There are some silver linings too, right?
That's right.
The report does mention a few bright spots.
Yeah.
Loan demand is steady. Some sectors are still seeing growth, and there's even a bit of cautious optimism in the trucking industry.
You know, that optimism in trucking is particularly interesting to me because it often reflects broader economic trends. You know, if goods are moving, it usually means businesses are producing and consumers are buying,
Right.
at least to some extent. It suggests that while there's definitely a slowdown, things aren't grinding to a halt.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got uncertainty in the job market, rising costs from tariffs, a cautious consumer,
Yeah.
and a housing market that's playing hard to get.
Right.
So what's the takeaway for all of this? What does it mean for someone listening to this right now, maybe trying to figure out their next career move or wondering if they should buy a house?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of being informed and adaptable. We're in a very volatile economic climate, and things can change quickly. So staying up to date on the latest trends, both nationally and locally, is crucial.
You're saying we shouldn't bury our heads in the sand and just hope for the best.
Exactly. Being proactive is key. Don't just wait for things to happen, right?
Right.
Anticipate them. For example, if you're in a field that's likely to be impacted by automation,
Yeah.
what steps can you take now to make yourself more valuable in the future?
Right.
Can you learn new skills? Can you specialize in a niche area?
Oh.
Can you build a strong professional network?
So it's not just about finding a job, it's about future-proofing your career, right?
Right.
Making sure you're always in demand no matter what the economy throws your way.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that same proactive mindset applies to your personal finances as well.
Okay.
If you're worried about inflation eroding your purchasing power,
Right.
look for ways to trim your expenses. Maybe cut back on discretionary spending. Negotiate lower rates on your bills. Or find ways to boost your income with a side hustle.
I like that you mentioned side hustles. It seems like everyone has one these days.
I know.
And it makes sense in this kind of economy. Having multiple streams of income can give you a safety net if one source dries up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's all about diversifying your income streams, just like you would diversify your investments.
Right.
It spreads the risk and makes you more resilient to economic shocks.
Makes sense. So it's about being informed, adaptable, and proactive.
Yes.
Those are the big takeaways so far. But there's also this underlying sense of anxiety that keeps coming up, both in the Beige book and just in general conversations I'm having with people.
Right.
How do we deal with that? How do we stay optimistic when the economic outlook seems so uncertain?
That's a great question. And I think it's important to acknowledge that anxiety.
Okay.
You know, it's natural to feel stressed when the economy is shaky, especially if you're worried about your job, your finances, or your future. But it's important not to let that anxiety paralyze you.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah. It is. But there are things you can do to manage that anxiety and stay grounded. One thing I find helpful is focusing on what you can control.
Okay.
Yes, there are these big economic forces at play that we can't individually change,
Right.
but there are things within our sphere of influence that we can impact.
Okay.
We can choose how we spend our money, how we invest our time, and how we develop our skills.
So it's about taking ownership of your situation, even if it feels like the world is spinning a little too fast.
Exactly. And remember, even in the midst of economic downturns, there are always opportunities.
Okay.
New industries emerge, new technologies are developed, and new ways of doing business are created. It's a time of disruption, but it's also a time of innovation.
So maybe instead of fearing change, we should embrace it.
Yeah.
Look for those silver linings in the economic storm clouds.
Precisely. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
Everyone is feeling the effects of this economic roller coaster to some degree.
Yeah?
Talk to your friends, family, and colleagues. Share your concerns. Brainstorm ideas and support each other. Sometimes just knowing that others are going through similar challenges can make a huge difference.
It's like that old saying, a burden shared is a burden halved.
Right.
We're stronger together, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings me to another important point.
Okay.
Community involvement. One of the things I find most inspiring about the Beige book is that it highlights the resilience and creativity of local businesses and communities.
You're saying that even when the national economy is shaky, local communities can still thrive.
Yes, and I think that's a powerful message of hope.
Okay.
By supporting local businesses, volunteering in our communities, and working together to address local challenges, we can create a more resilient and vibrant local economy.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the national headlines and forget about the power of our own communities.
Right.
So what you're saying is if we want to see positive change, we need to start at the grassroots level.
Exactly. And that leads me to something I've been thinking about a lot lately, something that goes beyond just economics and speaks to a deeper truth about our interconnectedness.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this deeper truth you've been thinking about?
Well, the Beige book focuses on economic trends, right?
Right.
But as we've been discussing, those trends are ultimately driven by human behavior. What we choose to buy, where we choose to work, how we choose to invest, all of those individual decisions
Right.
add up to create the larger economic picture.
So you're saying we're not just passive observers of the economy, we're active participants in shaping it.
Exactly. And that realization can be both empowering and a little daunting.
Right.
It means we have a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to our communities and to the future to make conscious choices that support a healthy and sustainable economy.
That's a lot of responsibility. But I see what you mean. If we all just focus on our own self-interest without considering the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it's easy to see how things can go off track.
Think about it this way. Every dollar you spend is a vote. It's a vote for the kind of businesses you want to support, the kind of products you want to see, more of the kind of world you want to live in.
So even something as simple as choosing to buy locally grown produce or supporting a small business instead of a big chain
Right.
can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those choices might seem small in isolation,
Right.
but when multiplied across millions of people, they can shift the balance of power, influence market trends, and ultimately contribute to a more equitable and sustainable economy.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. It's kind of like the butterfly effect, right?
Exactly.
One small action can have a huge impact down the line.
And that's why I think it's so important to be mindful of our economic choices,
Okay.
to think beyond just the immediate gratification and consider the long-term consequences.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Beige book, I think the challenge for all of us
Yeah.
is to take this knowledge and apply it to our own lives.
Right.
To be more aware, more intentional, and more engaged in shaping the economic future we want to see.
Well said. And remember, even small changes can make a difference. It's not about being perfect. It's about moving in the right direction.
I love that. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. So to our listeners out there, as you navigate this uncertain economic landscape, remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together, figuring things out as we go. And who knows, maybe by making conscious choices and supporting each other, we can actually create a brighter economic future, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
That's a beautiful thought.
And that'll do it for today's deep dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating look at the forces shaping our world. Until then, stay curious and stay engaged.